Hi, Anya Bartholomew here. Today we're going to talk about why it just got easier to buy a foreclosed home, how you can take advantage of it, and most importantly, what are the steps and also what are the pros and cons of buying a foreclosed home. Ready to roll? Buckle up, let's go. And before we get started, as usual, I'm Anya Bartholomew, your local YouTube real estate agent, and if there is anything I can do for you, let me know. I'm here 24/7 on the YouTube channel. Let's start with the first question. How come it got easier to buy a foreclosed property? Well, the good news is Federal Housing Finance Agency just announced that owner-occupants and then nonprofits and public entities, they can now exclusively buy foreclosed properties before they're available to investors. And the time frame for that is 20 to 30 days. And that's great news for the buyers, don't you think? Now, before we get into how to take advantage of that, let's kind of sync up our definitions of foreclosed properties, right? We know that foreclosure process consists of four pretty distinct phases. Phase number one, pre-foreclosure. And during the first 90 days in Utah, for example, well, that's the period where you can still reinstate your loan, at least, without all the government's new programs that are available right now. I'm talking about historical, traditional timeline. We all know about pre-foreclosure through a very distinct process that we all hear it's short sales, right? So short sales is the situation when you have a $300,000 mortgage, but the home is worth $200,000. Well, there are no homes right now in $200,000 range, but just to make the point. So if the short sale is successful, then the bank accepts less than the mortgage payment, and the homeowner gets off the hook. The foreclosure process always involved, at least three parties: the homeowner, the bank, and the buyer, right? So everyone has a very different motivation. So the homeowner obviously wants to sell the house for as much as they can, get rid of foreclosure so that his credit or her credit is not affected. That's a valid motivation. Well, traditionally, we all heard that supposedly foreclosure will hurt your credit for 7 years. However, when I worked in 2008 with a lot of foreclosures, a lot of my clients who were in foreclosure 4 years later were able to buy a home. So, you have to do a little bit more research how it applies specifically in your situation. But the motivation is very clear. Now, the bank motivation is quite different. Of course, the bank also wants to get as much value of the property, but at the same time, they don't want to sit on it for too long. Now, the reason, just in case you don't know, the reason the bank cannot just come and take the property is because the bank is not on the title. The bank doesn't own it. The bank is simply a lien holder. So to make this transfer from the ownership, from the homeowner to the bank, so that the bank becomes the owner, that's the process, is basically what foreclosure is taking care of. Now, if you're a home buyer trying to buy foreclosure, well, then there are pros and cons for you as well, because as a buyer, of course, you want the best price, right? And then the price comes with a very, very lengthy timeline. Normally, it actually could last a year. Some short sales lasted over a year, but we're not going to go there. But anyway, short sale is a very lengthy process, and you might be able to sit on this, on this uncertainty for such a long time, and in the end, the bank may not even approve the price. You might be better off just buying a regular home. A very significant pro for the home buyer who is, trying to buy a short sale is actually the ability to do inspection and use the inspection list to negotiate with the bank. That's a very effective strategy if done right. Now, according to Utah law, after 90 days of default, where the notice of default is filed, there is another 30 days where, the auction is being advertised, and after that, the process moves into the auction phase. Well, auctions has a lot of pros and cons to that, and we're going to cover them very quickly. Buying a foreclosed property at the auction is very, very, very risky. However, we all know high risk, high return. Or, it can be also like a gamble. So the first thing is very important to understand is that when you are having a list of properties that are going to be auctioned, within the upcoming week, you really don't have access to the property. They can be just closed. They can be still occupied by homeowners. Then nobody's going to let you in to get you even a general awareness of what the condition of the home might be. And that can result in a very, very unpredictable list of repairs, and therefore repairs budget. In addition to repairs, it is very, very difficult to estimate the true value of the home, because if you cannot see the inside, it's very difficult to estimate the appraised value. And therefore, you're guessing plus or minus, thousands of, maybe tens of thousands of dollars. And that again adds to the risk factor big time. Another super distinct feature of buying a home at the auction, well, ask me how I know. You have to come up with a $5,000 check, and that check, is going to be, if you are the winning bidder, then that check goes straight to the trustee who is executing the sale of the home on the behalf of the bank or the mortgage lender. And that $5,000 check is actually non-refundable. And that's not all. In the next 24 hours, you've got to bring a lot of cash. The remaining cash is due in cash funds, in cashier's check, within 24 hours. So that is very big consideration for, considering buying a foreclosed property at the auction. Another super important consideration when you're buying a home at the auction is actually the research needed, and the legal understanding to understand the priorities of liens, because there can be an insane amount of liens attached to a property that you are buying. You need to research who owns the property, because mistakes are made all the time, and also some liens can be washed off, so to say, through the foreclosure, but some liens will stay. And, to understand that and to know that requires a lot of research, and very often you're going to have very little time to do the research, and you have to have resources, and again, the legal understanding of all those specificities. So the risk of buying a home in foreclosure at the foreclosure auction is actually super high. And therefore, if you go just, for the fun of it, to any of the auctions, local auctions, you're going to see that a lot of people there are very, very, very experienced. They have access to insane amount of cash. They have access to insane amount of legal advice, and also basically they're real pro, they're real, experts at what they do. And therefore it's really, really difficult to compete with them. You still can, and you might, win here and there, but in the bulk part, you're going to have a lot of competition from a very, very serious, very experienced investors. Now, moving to the next phase where you can also buy a foreclosed property. That's basically when the property sold at the auction, was placed at the auction, but then nobody bought it. It goes back to the bank. And so the bank becomes the official owner. And what does the bank do? They do REO, real estate owned properties. And these are the properties that realtors will put on multiple listing services. And that's where you can find bank-owned properties, all the time. Now, you've considered all my warnings, and now you see, I want to buy foreclosed properties. Where do I find them? Well, first of all, during the first 90 days, when the homeowner is in default and often they haven't decided which way they want to proceed, you really cannot, a lot of those homes, if the homeowner didn't decide to sell, you're actually not going to find it, very easily. In fact, you have to subscribe to the county recorder's office that will have this information when notice of default was filed. It's possible to do, it's easy to do, but again, there's an extra service and you need to understand how it all works. But that's how you can get the list of those properties. And then you have to use your marketing, door knocking, mailers, and, you name it, all of those traditional, stuff, definitely internet for sure. And anyway, so that's the first phase where you can get the properties that is not still available to a lot of competition on the MLS. That's phase one. Now, how do you buy the property that's a short sale? So that's basically when the homeowner decided, yep, I'm going to sell, so list my property real estate agent and let's get the buyers. So you're just going to find the property just the way you're going to find regular houses on the MLS through the search button. You may, enter keywords for foreclosed properties and so, but as of today, I looked up on Utah MLS and I found actually in Washington County, one property that is right now in the short sale. And there were 8 others for the entire Utah, active properties, but they're definitely not in the top 3 major real estate market in Utah, which is Salt Lake, Utah County, and Washington. They were all in a very different different counties. It's all over the place and somewhere that's not very, very accessible for the majority of buyers. In whatever phase of foreclosure you're gonna buy the property or you want to buy the property, I highly recommend that you hire an expert. You've got to work with a realtor because the realtor who's experienced in short sales, will really be worth hiring because, there's so many nuances, there are so many mistakes, it really comes from experience. I saw experienced agents doing really big mistakes that ended up really very significantly compromising the bottom line. So do your homework. And the final question, how do you buy a property, a foreclosed property, when it becomes bank owned? Well, it goes back on the MLS and the listing agent will just list it like a regular home for sale. And the advantage here is, of course, you have an opportunity to do regular appraisal. Oh, great thing. A regular inspection, great thing. And in some cases, you might even be able to negotiate also the repairs list. In some you can, in some you cannot. It's kind of like, it just goes case by case, but at least you're going to have the opportunity to regularly inspect the home so that you know what you're getting yourself into. And the truth is, a lot of foreclosed homes, at least previously, they were like fixer-uppers. So you need to have a plan for what you're going to be doing after you buy it. And very much so, if they're foreclosures and they're fixer-uppers, you will not be able to get FHA financing of them. So make sure you line up the right financing for those cases. And the last but not least, so yes, you can buy foreclosed properties on the local MLS. However, there are 3 more websites that are going to give you that also have those foreclosed properties listed. One is HUD.gov, then homesteps.com and homepath.com. These are sometimes, like when there's a lot of properties going on and they're moving very quickly, these might have sometimes listed properties that are not listed on the local MLS. Right now, I've checked, there is not much going on, but you guys, we're living in a situation where geopolitical risk is through the roof. We never know where foreclosure is going to hit the market. So I think it's good to be prepared. And so this information that I shared with you today can really help you big time. And as always, if you find this information useful, helpful, or insightful in some way, click the like button and then subscribe. And also, I would love to know, what you think about buying foreclosed home. If you had any experience or if you might have other questions